That's 1-800-257-1257.
This is CNN.
Russian President Boris Yeltsin takes his place on the world diplomatic stage.
Global leaders converge on New York for talks that reflect a new world.
But there is controversy, too. The UN Security Council summit begins tomorrow. And welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Frank Sesno in Washington.
And I'm Donna Kelley at CNN Center in Atlanta. Hello. Boris Yeltsin is back in the spotlight 3 days after he ducked from view in Moscow. For a few days, Mr. Yeltsin is trading troubled Mother Russia for the glamour of world diplomacy. In the United States, he'll make his first trip to Camp David after attending the first ever summit of the United Nations Security Council. The whirlwind tour began in London, and that's where we begin with CNN's Richard Blystone.
The new special relationship began when his predecessor was welcomed here by his predecessor, back in the days when all this was unforeseen. Now, part of what the two leaders were doing was showing their own people there's a new order and they're in charge. Prime Minister Major, who has a recession going and an election coming up, spent 4 hours with President Yeltsin, who has an economic crisis going and a rebellious vice president in Parliament. They signed a declaration of friendship and cooperation, a prelude, they said, to a formal treaty. Major presented himself as the first world leader to denounce the August coup in the Soviet Union and one who's pressing for world economic support for Russia. He announced new British investment credits for the countries of the former USSR, and he offered to help Russia scrap its nuclear arsenal.
We have agreed to cooperate on handling surplus Soviet nuclear weapons and safeguarding nuclear materials, and we will be sending a technical mission to Moscow to assess the immediate needs at first hand.
Yeltsin declared the West should think not of aid, but of investing in peace.
Should the reforms fail, we shall face a new leadership which will reverse the progress that we have so far achieved, and Russia will fall into the abyss which had been digged for 74 years.
New era or no, the past was not entirely forgotten. Before leaving Britain, Yeltsin had one more date with Margaret Thatcher, who as Prime Minister first ushered Mikhail Gorbachev onto the world stage and called him a man she could do business with. After a meeting at the Russian embassy, Yeltsin got her endorsement too.
Not only a great degree of courage, but a great degree of leadership, and he needs support now.
Yeltsin had been expected to follow up his plea for Britain to cut its nuclear arsenal, but he shrugged it off.
Это несопоставимо с нашим количеством.
The number of nuclear weapons at the disposal of the United Kingdom is not really comparable to the numbers that we have.
На эту тему дискуссировать.
That matter is not worth any discussion.
A political relief for Major, who still vows to replace Britain's aging fleet of Polaris missile submarines with 4 new Trident subs. The opposition here says as the U.S. and Russia cut back, it's inappropriate for Britain to go ahead with a program that could more than double the number of British warheads. President Yeltsin appears to have let Prime Minister Major off the hook on nuclear disarmament, but the opposition here in Britain will not. The government claims that in a rapidly changing world, the Trident submarine is Britain's insurance against the unforeseen. How much use it would actually be against the unforeseen is also unforeseen. Richard Blystone, CNN, London.
What is foreseen is that Boris Yeltsin is now on his way to New York for tomorrow's summit on the role of the United Nations in the new world order. He'll meet with other heads of state before heading to Camp David for his talks with President Bush over the weekend. And Mr. Bush will also attend that UN summit, as will British Prime Minister John Major. It's not all harmony and friendship, however. There is controversy surrounding at least one participant, China's Prime Minister Li Peng, the architect of China's 1989 crackdown on the democracy movement. CNN's Charles Feldman is at the United Nations and joins us now live with a bit of a look at what to expect coming up. Charles?
Yes, Frank, only about an hour or so ago, the diplomats here figured out how to word a very important document. It's the document that they hope the heads of state, when they arrive here tomorrow for this summit, this unique summit, will sign off on. It's a document that will set the agenda, if you will, set a course for the United Nations in the years to come. It's a document that talks about preventive diplomacy, it talks about the UN's role in peacekeeping and peacemaking all around the world. There are some last-minute snags in terms of how to word it, and it is expected that there'll be some further discussions tomorrow, but it is anticipated that when the time comes, the heads of state, representing 13 of the 15 members of the Security Council who will be here for the summit tomorrow, will in fact sign off on this document, setting the agenda for the future of the United Nations in this so-called New World Order. President Bush arrived in New York within the past hour for this summit meeting. On the agenda, he will be having some very important bilateral discussions with various heads of state. He'll be meeting, of course, with Boris Yeltsin. It's the first time that Yeltsin has been to the United States since he became president of Russia, Russia assuming the seat that used to be held in the United Nations by the now defunct Soviet Union. There will also be a controversial meeting between President Bush and the Prime Minister of China. For more on the Chinese angle, here now is CNN's Beijing bureau chief, Mike Chenoy.
He was the man who announced the imposition of martial law in Beijing, the Chinese leader most closely identified with the bloody crackdown on the Tiananmen Square democracy movement in June 1989. But today, 2.5 years later, Prime Minister Li Peng has confounded a hostile public and a skeptical world by not only surviving politically, but by leading China out of its post-Tiananmen Square diplomatic isolation.
Premier Li Peng is a very wily and very intelligent politician in his own right. He's a very intelligent man, much more intelligent than people may give him credit for.
Li Peng's participation at the United Nations Summit will be just the latest in a series of moves that have helped China's communist leadership regain its place in the world, from Secretary of State Baker to British Prime Minister John Major to Japan's then Prime Minister Toshiki Kaifu. Li has hosted a series of high-level visitors in Beijing. And from trips to New Delhi and Moscow and beyond, he has traveled the world, underscoring Beijing's determination to flex its muscles on the international stage. On the domestic front, too, Prime Minister Li has some solid achievements to his credit. Since Tiananmen Square, the Chinese leadership has managed to keep the lid on politically, yet still move ahead with market-oriented economic changes. And there is increasing talk, even from hardliners like Li, of the need to accelerate reform. To be sure, Li Peng presides over what is still a harsh communist dictatorship. But the relatively stable situation in China does stand in sharp contrast to the chaos in the former Soviet Union. Now, Li Peng is set to hobnob here with the world's most powerful leaders and to hold a much sought-after one-on-one meeting with President Bush. It is an immense boost to his prestige, and with China's elder statesman Deng Xiaoping now 87 years old, many diplomats and analysts believe it will increase Li Peng's chances of emerging as the country's paramount leader once the old guard in Beijing passes from the scene. Mike Chenoy, CNN at the United Nations.
Now, there are a number of diplomats here who suggest that this whole thing is no more than a big photo opportunity. But one diplomatic source told me a little while ago, how can you really call something a photo op when it sets the agenda for the United Nations into the 21st century? Charles Feldman, CNN, reporting live from the United Nations.
Thanks, Charles. And we'll have comprehensive coverage and full details of the Security Council Summit tomorrow on World Day at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. CNN World Affairs correspondent Ralph Begleiter will be live at the UN along with senior White House correspondent Charles Bierbauer, Moscow Bureau Chief Steve Hurst, and Beijing Bureau Chief Mike Chenoy.
And still ahead, a look at what lies ahead for Boris Yeltsin. We'll talk to a political analyst who has met with the Russian leader several times. Also ahead, why this man is dubbed the Houdini of Irish politics and why he's no longer living up to that name. And how this man is trying to send UN peacekeepers into Yugoslavia and what's standing in his way.
That's life.
You guys around next week?
Not me, I'm off to State College on Saturday.
You're still going? That's great.
What about your dad's surgery?
Hey, the bills and stuff.
No problem. He had some extra insurance to help pick up the bills.
Aflac Supplemental Insurance helps close the gaps in your health insurance, like deductibles and co-payments. Aflac lets life go right on, and that's the peace of mind you want. Aflac, insuring over 35 million people worldwide.
Alaska, if you've got what it takes, you can make it to the top.
At the Ashby Inn, the secret of our chicken rice recipe is in the rich taste of our chicken stock.
Country Inn rice dishes made with hearty country ingredients in Uncle Ben's rice. Taste the country in Uncle Ben's Country Inn. Rice dishes inspired by the finest inns.
Flu epidemic declared. Entire U.S. affected. What will you do? Doctors recommend Theraflu. Hot liquid medicine that works fast. Theraflu, strong therapy for flu symptoms.
We live in a complex world. Different beliefs, different ideas, different lifestyles. Nothing on television gives you a wider view of our world, or a closer one, uncut, uncensored. CNN World Report, a window on what sparks the human spirit. Reports from journalists who live out the story instead of outsiders who look in. CNN World Report, 3 p.m. Eastern, Sunday.
After years of speculation by the West, North Korea is finally admitting that it does have a nuclear facility. The admission came after North Korea signed a nuclear safeguards agreement with the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. It calls for on-site inspections of North Korea's nuclear facilities. But inspections can only come after North Korea's parliament ratifies the agreement. The North Koreans' long refusal to allow inspections has fueled suspicions it's developing its own nuclear arsenal.
He has been called the Houdini of Irish politics for his ability to free himself from political controversy. But Irish Prime Minister Charles Haughey has not been able to wriggle out of the latest scandal rocking his administration. The Prime Minister offered his resignation today amid accusations he had 2 journalists' telephones tapped. Andrew Simmons has that story.
A customary wave from Mr. Haughey, but he was preparing to say goodbye to an extraordinary career in politics. After his parliamentary party gathered, the end came as no surprise. He had denied receiving transcripts of telephone bugging 10 years ago, but that wasn't enough. It was one scandal too many. Only one party member, the man who made the allegations, didn't pay tribute to Mr. Haughey. All the rest spoke warmly of their leader.
I have no doubt, as far as I'm concerned, that he will rate not just as a leading statesman in this country, but a leading European statesman.
And the opposition paid tribute as well.
He's been a very keen parliamentarian, a witty parliamentarian. He frequently can put down his opponents with a joke more effectively than a long speech.
Mr. Haughey is said by close advisors to be emotional. He's making no public appearances today. The end of the so-called great survivor's political career came with a 3-paragraph statement. In it, he said he decided to retire in order to end the political uncertainty and hand over to a new leader. Albert Reynolds, sacked from the cabinet by Mr. Haughey after starting a leadership rebellion, has been favourite. He's hoping, though, for support from Finance Minister Bertie Ahern. But Mr. Ahern may stand himself, supported by Mr. Haughey, who left his office determined to block his arch-rival Mr. Reynolds from taking over. Andrew Simmons, ITN, Dublin.
Radical Palestinian leader George Habash is in Paris today undergoing medical tests. He suffered a stroke recently in Tunis, and doctors are apparently trying to determine whether Habash needs brain surgery. His presence in France has sparked some outrage, but French President François Mitterrand insists Habash's stay will be brief and says officials may question him about his terrorist activities. Habash has been linked to numerous terrorist attacks and hijackings.
Rumblings grow inside newly independent Croatia. Serbian leaders there vow to fight a United Nations peace plan. This comes as a UN envoy completes a delicate peacekeeping trip to the region. Jackie Szymanski with the story.
The latest round of Yugoslav peace talks are over for United Nations envoy Marek Goulding.
After a day of meetings, he announced plans to deploy UN peacekeepers in Yugoslavia are gaining support from both sides of the conflict.
I've received categorical assurances that the plan is accepted by a large number of my interlocutors. And I think there is, as I've said before, a very wide acceptance of the plan here. What is needed now is to tie up some loose ends.
But the loose ends could prove a stumbling block. The peace plan includes placing UN troops in areas where the heaviest fighting occurred between Croatian and Yugoslav federal forces. The leader of one such region, Krajina, has rejected that, saying the region must stay under Serbian control.
The first objection is Serbian Krajina is treated like a region of Croatia. Our second is the concept of demilitarizing Serbian Krajina, but leaving Croatian forces.
Despite that, Goulding was optimistic. He said the 25-day-old ceasefire appeared to be holding, the main condition before UN Blue Berets are sent in.
The violations of the ceasefire are not sufficiently numerous or grave to make it impossible to consider deploying a peacekeeping force in this country.
The UN envoy said he could not announce a timetable for the deployment until the remaining obstacles had been worked out. About 10,000 United Nations forces will be placed in Croatia. Goulding now heads back to New York to report on this latest round of peace talks. With acceptance of the UN plan so close, it won't be long before negotiators are back at the table again. Jackie Szymanski for CNN, Belgrade.
Still ahead, a preview of what Russian President Boris Yeltsin might hope to accomplish during his visit to the United States and his meetings at the United Nations. We'll be joined by Alan Weinstein of the Center for Democracy, who has met with Mr. Yeltsin several times.
Larry Bird was born to be a champion. He was instilled with a competitive fire and passion that would never die.
One way or another, Bird kills you.
Now there's a steal by Bird. Underneath the DJ light.
Larry Joe Bird was destined for glory in the game he loved. Get bird watching at its best in this amazing video. Larry Bird, a basketball legend. It's free with your paid subscription to Sports Illustrated, the best way to capture all the drama of sports every week.
There's only one place I'd rather be, French Lick.
Through rare footage, you'll follow the victory trail from the cornfields and basketball courts of Indiana to the hallowed halls of the Boston Garden, where the talented young Hoosier resurrects a fallen dynasty. Call this toll-free number now and be there when the championships are won. Share the glory, live the moments with the man who touched all who saw him play.
Larry Bird never quits. He has eyes all around his head.
We can always just give it to Larry. He needs to step back and shoot a three.
Bird, 4-3. Yes!
Exclusive footage captures the hard-fought and emotional duels with longtime rival Magic Johnson.
This game is Larry Bird. I mean, he's doing everything.
This official NBA video is a thrilling 60 minutes that you'll enjoy again and again, free from Sports Illustrated. Get your free video and a full year of Sports Illustrated. 54 issues, including the swimsuit issue, for only $1.29 an issue. Save over 55% off the cover price. And you may use your credit card. Follow all your favorites and all the excitement in Sports Illustrated. Call now to subscribe or renew and get this memorable video free. For quicker delivery, use your credit card. Don't miss this heartwarming tale of a boy who lived his dreams, the dreams of a champion. It's the story of a legend. The legend lives in Sports Illustrated. Call now.
Russian President Boris Yeltsin is scheduled to arrive in the United States in a few hours. He'll join other world leaders tomorrow at the United Nations for the Security Council Summit and meet one-on-one Saturday with President Bush at Camp David. The Russian leader faces difficult problems at home, an economy that's in shambles, and efforts to make sharp military cuts. Well, to get some insight into what Mr. Yeltsin might hope to accomplish during this trip, we turn to Alan Weinstein, president of the Center for Democracy. That's a nonprofit group that works to promote democratic reforms around the world. Alan Weinstein has met with Mr. Yeltsin several times, and he joins us in our Washington bureau. Alan, welcome to you. Nice to have you back.
Nice to be back, Donna.
Some folks are already saying that we are in a disarmament race. Do you think that's true? And what do you hope Mr. Yeltsin hopes to get out of that?
We are in a disarmament race. This visit by Yeltsin to meet John Major, George Bush, and Mr. Mulroney in Canada can be compared to Woodrow Wilson's trip to the Versailles Conference after the First World War, or Franklin Roosevelt's trips for the Yalta Conference and Truman at Potsdam after the Second World War. We're negotiating the terms of exit, and he and President Bush are obviously negotiating exactly how quickly one can arrange the end of what remains of the Cold War.
Rather than all those years of negotiation, you mentioned terms of exit. What about Mr. Yeltsin's disappearance earlier this week? Some folks said perhaps it was his health or he was on a party. And, of course, he had the Middle East Peace Conference going and stood up the Japanese foreign minister. What do you make of that?
Well, on another network, he has categorically denied that the reasons for this were anything but reasons of state. I take him at his word. You may remember that he showed up on a cruiser or battleship, I forget which, of the Black Sea Fleet. One of the reasons that Yeltsin's last few days of talking to the military in Russia and elsewhere was so important is that he reaffirmed the unity of the Soviet military, which in terms of its strategic and nuclear forces was a very important prelude to his discussions with Western leaders.
He certainly denied any problems with health, and in fact he even joked about it today, quoting Mark Twain. Do you think that somebody might pull him aside at this point, though, and say, Mr. President, we don't think that perhaps you're going to be able to do that now, that it causes a great deal of concern?
Well, I tell you, Donna, I think he is now presiding over the most successful diplomatic blitzkrieg in years, possibly since Lech Wałęsa first came west after he became president, or after he took over the leadership of Poland. What you're seeing is a coming out party. Russia taking over its Security Council seat. The Russian president meeting at Camp David with the American president. The Russian president being treated as a democratic ally of the West, not as a friendly adversary. All of that is very new, and it will be very visually exciting to all of us in the West, I think.
And at this coming out party, who do you think is going to be the darling of the party? Let's just concentrate on Mr. Bush and Mr. Yeltsin, and who has the most at stake here, and who could come out perhaps politically stronger?
Well, Yeltsin has proposed one step, put aside all of the other concrete areas. He's proposed essentially joint cooperation and joint management of a strategic defense initiative or of a variety of other initiatives. He's in fact trying to move the discussions with the United States from the negotiation downwards of weapon systems to the construction of the strategic framework of the New World Order, whatever that phrase comes to mean.
Mr. Yeltsin certainly considered a hero as he stood up to the tanks in the August coup, but now that things are tough in supply and demand with little supply, and somebody stands in a bread line, that hero worship tends to dim a little bit. How critical is that to his power and staying in power if the people become restless, and even his vice president, Rutskoy, is criticizing him greatly? Well, his vice president's been criticizing him for some time, Donna. As far as food is concerned, the European community is giving about 75% of humanitarian aid. We're down to 10% or less. We should get that up. We need planes. Groups like ours have been delivering food. Many others have. We need transportation to get that distributed. You can distribute it. As for Yeltsin, I thought it took more courage to walk among the crowds of ordinary Russians and to listen to their complaints. I thought it took more courage to be a leader, an elected leader in a democracy, than even to stand on those tanks, because that was no fun for him, and yet he's done it in city after city. That's called communicating with the people. You were in Russia a few weeks ago, and you're going back. What did you see when you were there? How does it look to you? Dire hardship, but a determination, I think, on the part of a growing number of Russians of all categories, including many former supporters of the old regime, to make the transition successful. And as the leadership of the Russian government, and as many ordinary Russians tell you, of course, help us with humanitarian aid, but what we want is technical assistance. We want investment. We want joint ventures. We want to make that transition to democracy and a free market system. Where do you see the relationship between the United States and Russia going, and how important is it? It's an extremely important one, but you have to keep in mind one caveat. There is not going to be any kind of transatlantic condominium. Yeltsin, of course, will come to important agreements with President Bush, after which he will fly off to visit Prime Minister Mulroney. But ultimately, as Yeltsin himself has said, Russia is a European country. He wants it to fully rejoin Europe, and his relationships with Kohl, with Mitterrand, and the other Europeans are at least as important as his relations with us. Alan Weinstein, president of the Center for Democracy, thank you very much for your time and information today. Thank you. Frank? Donna, still to come, all creatures, great and small, aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery, home again after an extra day in space.
And the crew manning a remote scientific base in Antarctica gets a long-awaited phone hookup. Cold calls and more ahead on the International Hour.
Across the world, phones are ringing. Who's calling?
Hello, Mom.
People who have the AT&T Reach Out World plan. They're saving an average of 20% on calls to friends and family in over 50 countries and areas. Even if you spend only $12 a month on international calls, you'll save on your calls to Mexico, Canada, across the Atlantic, or the Pacific. Dial 1-800-258-3231. Then go ahead and call, and the longer you talk, the more you'll save. The low $3 monthly fee gives you over 120 hours a week to save. You'll even get a state-to-state discount. Across America, people are signing up for the AT&T Reach Out World plan. Because with these savings and all the quality and service you expect from AT&T, it's our best value in international calling. Sign up now.
Bertie, oh, that's good. It's hard to say no to a face like this.
That's probably why 1 in every 4 adult dogs is now overweight. And that's why these guys are getting new Alpo Lean. Like regular Alpo, it satisfies their hunger and adult nutritional requirements, but it's lowering calories, fat, and sodium. So it also satisfies all my requirements. Alpo, generations of healthy, happy pets.
Today, it sets the pace for the months ahead, but is the first primary make or break for most candidates, weighing the significance of New Hampshire on Inside Politics 92, today at 4:30 p.m. Eastern on CNN.
Weary but no worse for the wear, the crew of the Space Shuttle Discovery arrived home today.
No fear touchdown.
What a sight. They spent 8 days in space, the 8th day tacked on so they could complete more experiments on the effects of weightlessness and let their experimental crystals grow. The data will be used by those designing the space station Freedom. NASA hopes to have it permanently manned in 1999. Discovery's crew of 7 conducted experiments on themselves, as well as on a small menagerie of plants and insects loaded on board.
Antarctica is just a phone call away, thanks to a new satellite link installed at a base camp run by New Zealand. Scientists at Scott Base on McMurdo Sound say it may not work for ordering pizza, but it's still a great improvement over a weak and unreliable radio hookup dating back to 1957.
People are very tolerant around here. They used to waiting for phone calls, so it wasn't novel, but I think most people on the base have made at least 1 or 2 calls overnight. Somebody was going to ring Pizza Hut in Wellington last night, but I don't think they did. But it's a long way to come. It'll be cold probably by the time we got here.
Scientists say the satellite link will improve their work by enabling transmission of faxes and computer data.
And coming up on the International Hour, the latest in the persistent problem of Haitian refugees. We'll explain.
A cold always starts small, but before you know it, your cold is full grown. That's when you need Dimetap. If it was any stronger, you'd need a prescription. Dimetap Extend Tabs work for 12 full hours. It's the way to relieve the congestion and sneezing of a full-grown cold. Maximum strength Dimetap Extend Tabs. Relief for the full-grown cold. And for colds and flu with fever, now there's Dimetap Cold and Flu.
Doctors know there's a flaw in eggs. They're high in cholesterol, and diets high in cholesterol and fat can contribute to heart disease. Fleischmann's Egg Beaters are 99% real egg with 0 cholesterol and 0 fat. Egg Beaters, eggs without the flaw.
Call me a trendsetter, but I was eating wheat thins before people knew why they were baked and not fried. Now everybody knows who needs a greasy chip, right? Besides, wheat thins are delicious. Delicious is still in, isn't it?
International Hour continues, followed by Early Prime after this local commercial break. Next on CNN.
I've been eating A.E. cottage cheese for years. Some people think it's just for diets, but I'm smarter than that. Mommy and Daddy serve it with lots of foods that I can't even pronounce. But I like it right out of the carton. And in case you didn't know, the small critters remain small cottages, and the large critters remain large cottages.
AE Cottage Cheese. It's not just for diets anymore.
I knew that.
So, learned anything today?
Carl Vogel is a plumber.
I don't know.
The town of Carrollton, Georgia.
You learned about the wall coming down.
A town where TCI recently introduced cable television to the high school.
Dad?
At first, Carl didn't understand what cable television had to do with education.
I think maybe I might want to go to college.
But if you ask him today,
You think that'd be okay?
yeah, he'd say it's a change for the better.
I think maybe that would be okay.
This is CNN.
And now checking our top stories on the International Hour. In London, Russian President Boris Yeltsin and British Prime Minister John Major sign a joint accord on military and economic cooperation. But Mr. Major isn't jumping on the arms reduction bandwagon with both feet just yet. He refused a request by Mr. Yeltsin to halt production of nuclear-armed submarines. Mr. Yeltsin is now headed to New York for tomorrow's Security Council summit. President Bush will also attend that UN meeting. He arrived in New York a short while ago. Earlier, Mr. Bush was in Philadelphia making a pitch to voters for his latest budget plan. And after 10 years as Ireland's Prime Minister, Charles Haughey says he's stepping down. The 66-year-old leader announced his decision during a meeting with parliamentary deputies from his ruling party. Demands for Haughey's resignation followed reports that he tapped journalists' telephones.
Jan Hopkins is standing by at the New York Stock Exchange to give you a financial update this afternoon. Jan?
Thanks, Donna. Stock prices are solidly higher right now after a pretty indecisive day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average recouping some of yesterday's 47-point drop. The Dow up now about 11.40, in fact, exactly 11.40 at 32.36 and a third. Volume is heavy, 176 million shares trading so far, but 8 stocks are up for every 7 that are down. The broader and secondary markets are all higher. Earnings reports putting several companies into the spotlight today. Coca-Cola up 5 3/8 after reporting a 21% increase in fourth quarter earnings. UAL up 2 7/8 despite a $250 million loss in the fourth quarter. UAL does plan to cut capital spending by at least $2 billion over the next 4 years. McDonald's is up 2 1/8. Yesterday it reported a 7% increase in fourth quarter earnings. Stocks in London ended higher. The Financial Times 100 index gains 4 points to close at 2550.8. Buying began overnight in Tokyo. The Nikkei average rallied almost, well, I don't have the number actually, to a level of 21,557. That's up 195 points. In the U.S. manufacturing sector is back in the doldrums. Orders for durable goods plunged 5% in December, snapping a 2-month uptrend. That is the largest decrease in more than a year.
The drop in durable goods orders was greater than expected, but keep in mind that this took place during the month of December, when confidence was at a low ebb, both on the part of business people as well as consumers.
On a brighter note, Americans are earning and spending more money these days. Personal income rose 1% last month, the largest gain in 3 years. Spending picked up 0.3%. That puts the nation's savings rate at 5.8%. It's up from 5% the month before. Long-term interest rates are rising, extending yesterday's sharp gain. The Treasury's bellwether 30-year bond right now is down 13.30 and that yield is 7.78%. The dollar is gaining against major currencies. It's up more than a pfennig against the German mark, up 1 2/3 cents against the British pound. It's down slightly, though, against the Japanese currency. That's the latest in business news. One last check of the market shows that with less than a half an hour left in the trading day, the Dow is now up 13.41. I'm Jan Hopkins, reporting live from the New York Stock Exchange.
Jan, thank you. Germany's justice minister says his country will not cut any deals to win the release of 2 Germans, Heinrich Strubig and Thomas Kempner, still held hostage in Lebanon. Klaus Kinkel left Tehran today after asking Iranian officials for help in gaining the hostages' freedom. Other kidnappers are demanding the release of 2 Shiite Muslims imprisoned in Germany on terrorism charges.
Donna, we move now to our rather unconventional international legal files. A judge in London has handed down a suspended sentence to a man who admits he strangled his wife because of her nagging. The man claimed her death ended 18 years of abuse, which he says he tolerated to protect the children. The judge said the man had suffered enough. And in Iowa, meanwhile, a strange case of a different sort. A contempt citation remains in effect against a pig farmer. He allowed his animals to take over his house a few days before turning it over to his ex-wife. She claimed the pigs permanently damaged the place, and the farmer was jailed for contempt. An appeals court refused to overturn his 5-day sentence.
Still to come on the International Hour.
We've been shackled too long to London and English, and it's about time we stood up for our own rights.
New talk about independence for Scotland.
More reliable than most, this umbrella. Those who carry the travelers carry the choice of 50% of the Fortune 500 for property and casualty insurance that can help reduce claims and control cost. A full portfolio of pension fund investment options and one of America's largest healthcare networks. Open in case you want quality and service the traveler's way. You're better off under the umbrella.
San Antonio, where we predict you'll have the best time every time. For a free vacation kit with valuable discounts, give us a call.
On CNN today, all eyes are on New Hampshire. But is it the make or break primary? On Inside Politics. Then on Showbiz Today, where the early days, the happy days, recycled TV. All today on CNN.
Lou Waters is in Atlanta with a preview of what's coming up at the top of the hour for our viewers in the United States. Lou, what's ahead?
Well, Frank, among the stories we're covering on Early Prime, opening arguments in the sanity trial of confessed killer Jeffrey Dahmer. Early details, as you might imagine, are gruesome. And tough times pit two General Motors plants against each other. Only one, though, will survive. More about that. Early Prime, join Cheryl Atkinson and me at the top of the hour. See you then.
Lou, thanks. A public opinion poll in Scotland finds half the Scottish people favor independence from England. The poll published in newspapers yesterday shows 27% of those asked favor less radical changes, such as a separate Scottish parliament. Experts and people on the street say there is no doubt that support for independence is growing.
Good news. Good news for Scotland. It's about time. We've been shackled too long to London and English, and it's about time we stood up for our own rights.
I think the Scottish people are saying, in effect, listen, wake up, start hearing what we're actually saying. And the fact that despite that 80% for constitutional change, there's been this constant refusal, this deafness.
In the referendum of 1979, it was very clear that the greatest support for devolution was in the central belt, and to the north and to the south of that, there was rather less support for constitutional change. I think that's different now. I think throughout the whole of Scotland, there is a feeling that there's a need for change.
Only 19% of those surveyed want no change in Scotland's nearly 300-year-old union with England.
Back in the United States, the federal government filed affidavits this week hoping to overturn a ruling that barred the forced return of Haitian refugees. The number of Haitian boat people now held at a naval base in Cuba has reached 9,000, and there are reports that up to 20,000 more may be preparing to leave Haiti. CNN's John Zarello reports the flood of refugees is surpassing the resources to help them.
On the horizon, a virtual flotilla of rickety, overloaded boats. In recent days, the number of refugees fleeing Haiti has increased dramatically. More than 2,400 were picked up Monday and Tuesday. It is believed this exodus was sparked by a new wave of military violence on the island.
Those events only strengthen our view that the full restoration of democracy is the only acceptable solution to Haiti's crisis.
There is growing concern among some U.S. diplomats that the economic embargo aimed at forcing a restoration of democracy isn't working. New measures are reportedly in the works, including closing the U.S. embassy and, as a last resort, the use of military force. The administration refuses comment on any future moves. The administration is pressing the federal appeals court in Atlanta for a ruling on whether the Haitians can be repatriated. The tent city at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba is near capacity. The cutters are overloaded, and the cost of the operation is mounting. As of last month, the Coast Guard alone had spent more than $2 million.
Those numbers include extra food for the migrants, fuel for the cutters, extra spare parts for the cutters, maintenance costs, and all the other things that we had to provide, such as tarpaulins to cover the migrants on the decks of the cutters.
Haitian rights advocates say the camp cost is wasted money.
The government could have saved a lot of money if they'd done the right thing to begin with and brought the Haitians to this country.
Some Haitians rescued the past couple days are in poor condition. One child suffering spinal meningitis needed immediate attention. For now, many of the children find comfort in the arms of Coast Guardsmen, but their ultimate fate remains uncertain. John Zarella, CNN, Miami.
That's it for this part of the International Hour. We're glad you could join us. I'm Donna Kelley. See you, Frank.
See you, Donna. I'm Frank Sesno. Let's go now to Ralph Wenge for a look at what's ahead on the CNN World Report segment. Ralph?
Frank and Donna, just ahead, the plight of the Kurdish people. Last year, they captured the world's attention. But what's happened to them since the international spotlight moved on to other subjects? Well, in today's program, we'll speak with 3 journalists about this and other forgotten conflicts.
Before you really buy something, you should thoroughly investigate it. I took a chance this time and try to save a couple of dollars.
I found that the service wasn't there. So I went to AT&T and stayed with AT&T.
I don't want gimmicks. I want a long-distance phone company I can count on.
If you miss dealing with a long-distance company you can depend on, it's easy to come back to AT&T. Call 1-800-547-9995 and we'll switch you for free.
And I've tried every long-distance phone company that's out there.
After a few months, I said, forget it. I'm giving up on this. And I wanted to switch back to AT&T.
And I mean, I really feel that AT&T gives me the best service for what I want.
People who've seen what's out there are coming back for the service they deserve. Call AT&T right now, and we'll have you back in no time.
And the reason we switched initially was because of the, we're going to see this dramatic drop in our phone bill, and we didn't.
I mean, what's the point? They can't offer me substantially cheaper rates from what I've seen.
At AT&T, when we promise you savings, you get them. In fact, nobody gives you more ways to save. Come back now for free.
And it was just like a hassle figuring out both bills, both sets, and so we just said, hey, we just scrapped it and just now we get one phone bill and that's it. It's a lot easier to pay.
I think the reason I've stayed with AT&T is because it's always been easy.
AT&T makes everything easy, even switching back. Call now.
If I'm going to call my sister up in Canada, I want to hear, her voice, and if she sighs, I want to hear it. So I use AT&T.
I really like AT&T.
1-800-547-9995. The service and quality only AT&T guarantees. Right now, we'll switch you for free. What a great time to come back.
Welcome to CNN World Report, where we bring you news as reported by broadcasters around the globe from their perspective. I'm Ralph Wenge. The news media have been likened to a giant spotlight that briefly shines a probing light on some region of the world and then moves on to another. Well, occasionally that spotlight also applies some heat and affects change. But other times the media move on before there's been any resolution. Today we're going to look at some of those conflicts that have been forgotten. For several weeks last year, the Kurdish people captured the world's attention. We learned of their struggles in Iraq and Turkey and their desire for autonomy. But what's happened since then? Earlier this week, a leader of the Kurdish Workers' Party predicted the conflict would escalate into another Yugoslavia unless Turkey changes its policies. Almost 3 years ago, U.S. President George Bush announced his war on drugs. South America's powerful drug cartels dominated the news. We heard about peasants who said they couldn't afford to grow anything but coca plants, and drug barons who turned themselves in as part of a bargain with the government of Colombia. Now, that drug war has slipped out of the headlines, but the battle is far from over. Question is, will there be any winners? And finally, Cambodia, a country that assumed center stage briefly last fall,
when a member of the despised Khmer Rouge returned to town as part of a new coalition government. But what's happened since then? And what's become of the Cambodian refugees who filled our television screens 10 years ago as they fled their homeland? Where are they today? This week, the UN announced that more than 300,000 of those refugees would soon return home.
And joining us now to discuss these forgotten conflicts are three journalists who haven't forgotten. They still cover these stories. They are Kanokewan of Thailand's Channel 5, Kadri Ozen of TRT Turkey, and Machicao of Canal 11 Bolivia. Monica, it's been a good while now since we've heard anything concrete come from your region about the drug war. What's happened?
Well, the drug problem is going to be news again since the United States, the Andean nations, and a couple of other countries are preparing the second drug summit. During this time, about 2 years, they launched a program. They launched a program of interdiction and also of alternative development that my country called it like that, which is focused its attention on helping all the peasants in my country that grow the cocoa leaf. The major problem in my country is that most of the people that are linked with our traffickers are not criminals. They're not people that's dealing with a lot of money or dealing with drugs directly. It's people that lives under the poverty line, which have the real need of the money that they get from the cocoa crops.
Are they going to be able to go into this summit with any concrete results over the year?
Well, the government definitely has a lot of results, and positive results, I think. Maybe they haven't reached the goals that they wanted to, but they definitely have developed a lot of projects that help those people, not only to give them the skills, agricultural skills, to substitute the cocoa crops, but also to make better conditions of life to them.
There was a time when we also covered this story in your region, too, with drugs. Is it getting worse or better or what?
I think right now it's kind of at a stalemate. There's, what with everything that's going on in Cambodia, you know, people are shifting their attention towards that area. But definitely the Golden Triangle is still there. And we suffer the same problems in Bolivia in the sense that the people who produce opium are below the poverty line. They have no other means of surviving if they don't grow opium. And it's just a very difficult situation.
Kadri, in Turkey, the story has been over the years with the Kurds, and then all of a sudden, we didn't hear too much about them. What is the latest there?
The latest, in Turkey, actually, there are some major changes about the Kurds, or what we call the security problem of the southeast region of Turkey. You know, there's a new coalition government in charge in Turkey after the October elections. And after the new coalition government took office, we can say that a change in the policy upon the security problem is quite visible. For example, this outlawed PKK organization started a campaign of attacks on civil and military targets in 1984.
Let's explain the PKK for a second, for those who don't know. That what they have wanted was an independent state for the Kurds, right? About 10 million of them.
Yes, actually the number is, of course, not clear, but there is an estimated number of 5 to 10 million Kurdish origin Turkish citizens living in Turkey. But, you know, there were some reports that for some time they were fighting for independence, and sometimes the leader said that they are not looking for it, and they said, we are living together for 700 years and we could go on, but we have to discuss something like federation.
Well, we're hearing new sounds from over there, and when we come back from this short break, we'll talk about that. We'll be right back.
TWA introduces low business flyer fares for business travelers who are really serious about saving money. Fly coast to coast with these low TWA fares on first class, business class, or coach, or connect to 60 cities through TWA's convenient St. Louis hub You can also take advantage of TWA's low business flyer fares to Europe. All fares are refundable without the usual penalties and restrictions. For reservations, call your travel agent or TWA at 1-800-221-2000.
Morning breath.
As soon as I have my coffee, it's all gone.
Whether you admit it or not, it's a problem.
Okay, I have morning breath, but it doesn't bother anyone.
Don't be so sure.
Mine's not so bad.
Morning breath's not as bad as you think. It's worse. So get Scope. Its 2 powerful ingredients kill 90% of the bacteria that cause morning breath.
Was my morning breath really that bad?
There's no denying morning breath, so save your breath with Scope.
This dry skin itch, won't anything stop it fast?
Lanacane will. Lanacane shuts off the itch like a switch, fast. Only Lanacane cream works on contact with the nerves that cause dry skin itch. Look, Vaseline Intensive Care can't. Jergens can't. These can't. And Lanacane Deep moisturizes too. Helps heal rough, dry skin. For dry skin itch, every itch.
Lanacane does shut off the itch, like a switch, fast.
My role will not just be that of a moderator, but a participant. You really never know what you'll see or hear because it's unrehearsed.
People come out of prison, repeat their crimes at an 80% level.
It's called real TV.
Just before we left for the break, we were talking with Kadri Ozen about the ongoing Kurdish problem, rather, in Turkey. We have now learned that apparently Turkey wants to launch a full-scale campaign, or that the PKK is about to launch a full-scale campaign. Is that right?
Yes, we heard some explanations like that, that they were in the preparation of a big attack during the springtime, and Turkish army are looking for some measures maybe to counter that kind of attack. But mainly the major change is not in the dimension of the military measures, but now for the first time Turkey starts to change the military measures with some democratic measures and social measures.
In Thailand, they have maybe a related problem, but different circumstances. About 13 years ago, during the Cambodian Civil War, Thailand took in many refugees from Cambodia. Now, there is a possibility they'll be going back. Is that right?
That is correct. The UN High Commissioner Sadako Okata has entered Thailand to review the situation, and she was hoping that in either March or April, these people can go back. But there are many difficulties. I think that one of the main difficulties is that there are still a lot of landmines in Cambodia, and just transporting over 300,000 people back into a country where there's still very little infrastructure or anything in that matter is just dangerous, if nothing else.
What have they been doing in Thailand all this time?
We've been...
No, what have the refugees been doing there?
A lot of times, at the refugee work camps, there are people who volunteer, and we give education, and a lot of times we just try to do handicrafts and learn and grow some, do plantations and things like that.
There are thousands of children who were born in Thailand, Cambodian children who were born there that have known no other home but Thailand.
Exactly, and it's going to be very difficult for them to go back to Cambodia. Although their parents want to go back, they know nothing but Thailand, and they speak Thai. They're almost practically like Thai children, so that is also a difficulty.
With all these regions, the base problem seems to go back to economics, so much of it. Monica, you've got your own set of economic problems in your region.
Really, in my region, the things are kind of serious. The economic problem is serious, but I may say proudly that my country have done this very well during the past 10 years. Democracy brought us a lot of good things. One of those is economic stability. We have reached a lot of the goals that we never thought that we were going to get. I mean, the government promised some things, and we first of all, journalists and common people didn't believe it, but we have reached them during these past 10 years. For example, I may give a little example of this. During 1985, Bolivia had 80,000% of inflation. That's incredible. I mean, nobody knows, nobody realized how to live like that.
Give us an example of some of the prices down there for goods that you go to the store for.
I don't know. For example, a kilo of meat, it's around $9, no, $3, 9 Bolivianos. But now things are really going pretty well. Last year, inflation was just over the 14.52%.
Will better economic climate down there alleviate the drug problem, or is it going to be like what a lot of people say, take the demand away and you'll improve the situation?
No, definitely it will be, because it's not a matter of spending money on programs to fight against drug trafficking. You have to get better the whole global economy. In that manner, all the people that have no other choice that going into the drug networks or have not direct but maybe indirect linkage with those things, that kind of business, dirty business of course, will have some other opportunities to make money and to survive and to bring food to the tables of their houses.
Kadri, what about the Turkish economy?
In Turkish economy, we have quite developments, because Turkey is one of the countries, I mean, in its region, one of the first countries who transferred its system to liberal market economy. So it gave Turkey lots of opportunities, but at the same time, we have some regional problems. Again, I will come to the problem of the southeast of Turkey. Those people are are living at the most neglected part of Turkey. Maybe that's why they have some problems that they feel they are not so like with the government or something.
We only have about 30 seconds. Shah, similar problems in Thailand?
Thai economy has been doing very well, actually.
Your neighbors are the ones who are having the troubles, right?
Exactly, and Thailand is trying very hard to help out its neighbors. Basically, we have projects in Cambodia to begin floating markets, floating hotels or things like that to help out their economy. But the Thai economy is doing quite well.
Kanokewan, Kadri, and Monica, thank you, all three of you, for joining us today. That's all for the CNN World Report for today. On tomorrow's program, we'll be joined by more journalists who have been in Atlanta for the CNN World Report Contributors Conference all this week. I'm Ralph Wenge. Lou Waters now has a look at what's ahead in the next hour. Right, Ralph. Coming up at the top of the hour, Mike Tyson's accuser takes the witness stand to tell her side of the story. And in Jim Huber's Sports, Lee Trevino begins a farewell tour of sorts. Join Cheryl Atkinson and me for Early Prime next here on CNN.
Coming up, Early Prime, followed by Inside Politics 92, after a word from your local cable systems here on CNN.